A bullet's echo haunts Elias Kane, a deserter turned bounty hunter, hiding in Arizona's sun-scorched desert of 1887. Once a cavalryman, he fled the blood of Apache massacres, seeking solitude. But one stormy night, he finds Nycha, a wounded Apache woman clutching a secret that could save her dying tribe, or doom them all. Their desperate journey through canyons and betrayal forges an unlikely alliance with a betrayed blacksmith, binding them in a fight for justice. Will their evidence topple a corrupt empire, or will the desert claim their hope? Subscribe and share where you're listening from to uncover their fate. Can they outrun their pasts and reach the truth? Stick around to find out. The Arizona desert in 1887 burned red under a merciless sun, its sands swallowing secrets as easily as it did men's hopes. Elias Kane, a shadow of a man at 35, trudged through the dunes near Red Canyon, his boots kicking up dust that clung like guilt. Once a cavalryman, he deserted after one too many Apache bloodbaths, the kind that left children's screams echoing in his skull. Now, he hunted game to survive, a Winchester slung across his back, his gray eyes scanning the horizon for threats or redemption, whichever came first. His weathered duster flapped in the dry wind, the only sound besides the distant howl of a coyote mourning the dying day. Night fell fast, a storm brewing in the bruised sky. Lightning cracked, illuminating the jagged cliffs like a warning from God. Elias tethered his horse, a sturdy roan named Jericho, under a rocky overhang, its breath steaming in the cooling air. He was skinning a jackrabbit when a faint groan cut through the wind's wail. His hand froze on the knife, ears straining. Another groan, human, raw with pain. He grabbed his rifle and crept toward the sound, moving low, a predator's instinct honed by years of regret. In a shallow gulch, half buried in sand, lay a woman. Apache, by her braided hair and deerskin dress, blood staining her side. Her dark eyes, sharp as obsidian, locked onto his, defiant even as her strength bled out. A deerskin pouch was clutched against her chest, her knuckles white from the effort. Elias hesitated. Helping her could draw the army's noose around his neck. He'd seen what they did to deserters and those who aided savages. But her gaze held him, a mirror to the faces he'd failed in that burning Apache camp years ago. "Damn it," he muttered, slinging his rifle and kneeling beside her. Her name was Nycha, whispered through gritted teeth as he carried her to his camp, her weight light as a child's, but heavy with purpose. The storm broke, rain lashing his face, turning the sand to treacherous mud. At the campfire's flicker, he cleaned her wound, a bullet graze, deep but not fatal if infection didn't take her. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice rough as gravel. "Mercenaries," she rasped, "hired by men who want our land." She pressed the pouch into his hands. "This can save my people." Elias opened it, revealing a folded map, brittle with age, marked with an army seal. It charted a path to a hidden spring, a sacred well, she called it, the last hope for her drought-stricken tribe. His gut twisted as he saw the seal's date, 1885, 2 years ago, when the army had sworn to protect Apache lands. "They knew," Nycha said, her voice steel despite her pain. "They hid the well to starve us out, to clear the way for silver mines." Elias's jaw clenched. He'd ridden with men who'd burned villages for profit, and the shame of it still scorched his soul. The distant bay of hounds broke the moment, a chilling promise of pursuit. Elias doused the fire, plunging them into darkness. "They're coming," he said, helping Nycha to her feet. She swayed but stood tall, her resolve a fire that outshone her wound. He packed his gear, mind racing. The army and their hired guns wouldn't stop at her. They'd hang him for desertion if they caught wind of this. but abandoning her wasn't an option. Not again. "We move now," he said, slinging her arm over his shoulder. "Through the canyon. Storm will cover our tracks." As they vanished into the rain-slicked night, Elias felt the weight of the map in his coat, heavier than any bounty he'd ever chased. This wasn't just about survival. It was about righting a wrong he'd carried too long. And if you're caught up in this tale of grit and redemption, folks, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're hearing this from. It keeps stories like these alive, stories of folks fighting against the odds. Elias and Naiche had a long road ahead, hunted by men with no mercy. Could they outrun the dogs and the ghosts of their pasts? Jericho snorted as they mounted, Naiche's breath ragged but steady against Elias's back. The storm roared, a beast unleashed, but it was no match for the one waking in Elias's chest, a need to protect something worth more than his life. The canyon loomed ahead, its shadows promising danger, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at salvation. The canyon swallowed Elias and Naiche, its walls jagged as a broken blade under the storm's fading growl. Rain-slicked stones glistened in the faint starlight, guiding their path deeper into the Arizona night. Elias steadied Naiche against Jericho's flank, her breath shallow but fierce, like a fire refusing to die. The map, tucked inside his duster, felt like a brand against his chest, a secret worth killing for. As they moved, the distant bay of hounds grew louder, a relentless promise of pursuit. Elias's gray eyes scanned the shadows, every creak of the canyon a potential ambush. Naiche's wound bled anew, staining her deerskin dress, but her grip on his arm was iron, her will a force stronger than pain. They found shelter in a shallow cave, its mouth half hidden by mesquite and scree. Elias eased Naiche onto a bed of dry leaves, her face pale as moonlight on bone. He tore a strip from his shirt to bind her wound tighter, the blood warm against his calloused hands. "Tell me about this well," he said, voice low, urgent as he worked. Naiche's eyes flickered with something ancient, sacred. "It's more than water," she whispered. "It's life. My people's stories say it flows from the earth's heart, guarded by spirits. The army sealed its location to break us, to let the mines take our land." Her words cut deeper than the knife at his belt. Elias knew the army's betrayal too well, had seen villages razed for less than silver. He built a small fire, its glow hidden by the cave's curve, and studied the map by its light. The army seal mocked him, a reminder of orders he'd followed blindly. Lines traced a path through the black mesas to a hidden canyon, marked with symbols Naiche said were Apache prayers for protection. "They'll kill to keep this buried," she said, catching his gaze. "The mining men, the army, they want us gone." Elias nodded, his jaw tight. He'd deserted to escape that machine of greed, but it had found him again, dragging him back into its jaws. The hound's howls sharpened, closer now, maybe a mile off. Elias doused the fire, plunging them into darkness. "We can't stay," he said, helping Naiche stand. She swayed, clutching the pouch with the map's edge peeking out, her lifeline to her people. "If I fall," she said, voice steady despite her pain, "take it to my brother, Taza, in the White Mountains." Elias met her eyes, seeing not just a warrior, but a woman carrying her tribe's hope. "You won't fall," he growled, more to himself than her. "Not while I'm here." They slipped deeper into the canyon, Jericho's hooves muffled by wet sand. Elias's mind raced. Every trail he knew led to open ground, easy pickings for trackers. But Naiche pointed to a narrow fissure in the rock, barely wide enough for a man. "There," she said. "An old path. It'll slow them." Elias trusted her instinct, born of a lifetime evading hunters. The fissure was a gamble, its walls scraping their shoulders, but it hid them from the dogs' noses. As they emerged into a wider ravine, a rifle shot cracked, echoing off the stone. Elias pulled Nietzsche down, heart pounding. A warning shot, not a kill. Someone wanted them alive, for now. "Elias Kane!" A voice boomed from above, cold as the desert night. "We know you've got the Apache. Hand her over, and you walk." Elias recognized the drawl. Hank Travers, a mercenary he'd crossed paths with in Tucson, a man who'd sell his own kin for $1. Nietzsche's hand tightened on the pouch, her eyes daring Elias to betray her. He shook his head, whispering, "Not a chance." If you're gripped by this fight for survival, folks, hit that subscribe button on your platform. It's your support that keeps these stories of defiance burning bright. Can Elias and Nietzsche outwit men who hunt for blood money? The ravine offered no cover, just shadows and stone. Elias led Jericho into a cluster of boulders, Nietzsche's breath hot against his neck as they crouched. Travers's men were closing in, their lanterns flickering like wolves' eyes. Elias checked his Winchester, 6 rounds left. Enough to make a stand, not enough to win. Nietzsche's hand brushed his, steadying him. "The well's worth it," she said, her voice a blade cutting through his doubt. "For my people." Elias nodded, the weight of her trust heavier than the rifle. The hounds' baying grew frantic, their masters near. The fight was coming, and with it, a choice: run or stand, live or die. The canyon swallowed Elias and Nietzsche, its walls jagged as a broken blade under the storm's fading growl. Rain-slicked stones glistened in the faint starlight, guiding their path deeper into the Arizona night. Elias steadied Nietzsche against Jericho's flank, her breath shallow but fierce, like a fire refusing to die. The map, tucked inside his duster, felt like a brand against his chest, a secret worth killing for. As they moved, the distant bay of hounds grew louder, a relentless promise of pursuit. Elias's gray eyes scanned the shadows, every creak of the canyon a potential ambush. Nietzsche's wound bled anew, staining her deerskin dress. But her grip on his arm was iron, her will a force stronger than pain. They found shelter in a shallow cave, its mouth half hidden by mesquite and scree. Elias eased Nietzsche onto a bed of dry leaves, her face pale as moonlight on bone. He tore a strip from his shirt to bind her wound tighter, the blood warm against his calloused hands. "Tell me about this well," he said, voice low, urgent as he worked. Nietzsche's eyes flickered with something ancient, sacred. "It's more than water," she whispered. "It's life. My people's stories say it flows from the earth's heart, guarded by spirits. The army sealed its location to break us, to let the mines take our land." Her words cut deeper than the knife at his belt. Elias knew the army's betrayal too well, had seen villages razed for less than silver. He built a small fire, its glow hidden by the cave's curve, and studied the map by its light. The army seal mocked him, a reminder of orders he'd followed blindly. Lines traced a path through the black mesas to a hidden canyon, marked with symbols Nietzsche said were Apache prayers for protection. "They'll kill to keep this buried," she said, catching his gaze. "The mining men, the army, they want us gone." Elias nodded, his jaw tight. He'd deserted to escape that machine of greed, but it had found him again, dragging him back into its jaws. The hound's howls sharpened, closer now, maybe a mile off. Elias doused the fire, plunging them into darkness. "We can't stay," he said, helping Nietzsche stand. She swayed, clutching the pouch with the map's edge peeking out, her lifeline to her people. "If I fall," she said, voice steady despite her pain, "take it to my brother, Taza, in the White Mountains." Elias met her eyes, seeing not just a warrior, but a woman carrying her tribe's hope. "You won't fall," he growled, more to himself than her. "Not while I'm here." They slipped deeper into the canyon, Jericho's hooves muffled by wet sand. Elias's mind raced. Every trail he knew led to open ground, easy pickings for trackers. But Nietzsche pointed to a narrow fissure in the rock, barely wide enough for a man. "There," she said. "An old path. It'll slow them." Elias trusted her instinct, born of a lifetime evading hunters. The fissure was a gamble, its walls scraping their shoulders, but it hid them from the dogs' noses. As they emerged into a wider ravine, a rifle shot cracked, echoing off the stone. Elias pulled Nietzsche down, heart pounding. A warning shot, not a kill. Someone wanted them alive, for now. "Elias Kane!" A voice boomed from above, cold as the desert night. "We know you've got the Apache. Hand her over, and you walk!" Elias recognized the drawl. Hank Travers, a mercenary he'd crossed paths with in Tucson, a man who'd sell his own kin for $1. Nietzsche's hand tightened on the pouch, her eyes daring Elias to betray her. He shook his head, whispering, "Not a chance." If you're gripped by this fight for survival, folks, hit that subscribe button on your platform. It's your support that keeps these stories of defiance burning bright. Can Elias and Nietzsche outwit men who hunt for blood money? The ravine offered no cover, just shadows and stone. Elias led Jericho into a cluster of boulders, Nietzsche's breath hot against his neck as they crouched. Travers's men were closing in, their lanterns flickering like wolves' eyes. Elias checked his Winchester. 6 rounds left, enough to make a stand, not enough to win. Nietzsche's hand brushed his, steadying him. "The well's worth it," she said, her voice a blade cutting through his doubt. "For my people." Elias nodded, the weight of her trust heavier than the rifle. The hounds baying grew frantic, their masters near. The fight was coming, and with it, a choice. Run or stand, live or die. The canyon swallowed Elias and Nietzsche, its shadowed walls closing like jaws around their fleeting forms. Rain pelted the Arizona night of 1887, turning the red earth to a slick, blood-hued mire. Elias urged Jericho forward, Nietzsche's arms tight around his waist, her breath hot and uneven against his neck. The map in his coat pocket burned heavier than the rifle across his back, a secret that could save a tribe or damn them both. Behind, the hounds' baying grew fainter, drowned by the storm's roar. But Elias knew their pursuers wouldn't quit. Men who hunted for silver and power never did. They reached a shallow cave, its mouth barely wide enough for Jericho to pass. Elias dismounted, easing Nietzsche down, her face pale under the storm's dim glow. Her wound seeped, staining her deerskin dress darker. "Stay put," he growled, checking the cave's depths for threats. Rattlesnakes or worse, men lying in wait. Finding only damp stone, he returned to her side, tearing a strip from his shirt to bind her wound tighter. "Talk to me, Nietzsche. What's this well worth dying for?" Her eyes, sharp despite the pain, met his. "The sacred well isn't just water," she said, voice low like the wind's moan. "It's life. My people are dying. Children, elders, warriors, choked by dust while the army hoards what could save us." She tapped the pouch, now tucked inside her dress. "This map proves they knew about the well when they signed treaties promising our land's safety. They lied to clear us out for silver." Elias's gut churned. He'd seen the army's promises turn to ash before, villages burned under protection orders. The map's army seal, dated 1885, was a confession of betrayal. He lit a small fire, just enough to warm the cave's chill. Nietzsche pulled the map out, spreading it on the stone floor. Its lines traced a winding path through canyons to a hidden spring, marked with Apache symbols Elias didn't understand, but felt the weight of. "My father," Nietzsche said, "died protecting this secret. He said the well holds our ancestors' blessings, water that heals more than thirst." Her voice hardened. "The mining company wants it dry so they can dig without resistance. Judge Croft, he's their puppet, signed orders to keep us from it." Elias studied the map, his calloused fingers tracing the route. "Croft," he muttered. He'd heard of the judge, a man whose gavel fell like a hangman's axe, always favoring the mining barons. "If this gets out, it'll ruin him." Nietzsche nodded. "And the senator pulling his strings, but they'll kill to keep it buried." The firelight danced on her face, revealing a resolve that shamed Elias's own doubts. He'd run from his past, but she carried hers like a weapon. The hound's baying surged again, closer now, cutting through the storm's din. Elias stomped out the fire, plunging them into darkness. "They're gaining," he said, helping Nietzsche to her feet. Her hand gripped his arm, steady despite her wound. "There's a ghost trail," she whispered. "Old Apache path, hidden in the rocks. They won't know it." Elias hesitated, then nodded. Trusting her meant betting both their lives, but her eyes held a truth he couldn't deny. "Lead the way," he said, slinging his rifle. They slipped from the cave, Jericho's hooves muffled by the sodden earth. Nietzsche pointed to a narrow gap in the canyon wall, barely visible in the rain. "Through there," she said, her voice a blade cutting through fear. Elias followed, the path twisting like a snake's spine, rocks scraping his shoulders. The storm was their ally now, hiding their tracks, but the hound's cries dogged them, relentless as death. If you're gripped by this fight for survival, folks, hit that subscribe button on your platform. It keeps these stories of defiance burning bright, just like Nietzsche's spirit. Can they outwit men who'd kill for greed? The trail climbed, forcing Elias to half-carry Nietzsche as her strength waned. Her breath came in sharp gasps, but she never faltered, pointing out footholds only an Apache would know. At a high ledge, they paused, the storm's fury below them. Elias scanned the darkness, spotting lantern flickers, mercenaries closing in. "We're not outrunning them," he said, voice grim. Nietzsche clutched the map tighter. "Then we fight," she said, her eyes daring him to match her fire. Elias felt the weight of his past lift, replaced by a purpose as clear as the desert sky after a storm. They'd reach that well, or die trying. Nietzsche's challenge hung in the air, her eyes daring Elias to match her fire. The Arizona night of 1887 pulsed with the storm's fading growl, the canyon's walls looming like silent judges. Elias gripped his Winchester, the weight of her words stirring a resolve he thought he'd buried with his cavalry badge. They'd fight if it came to it, but first, they'd run. The ghost trail spat them out at dawn, where the desert opened into a cracked, dry riverbed, its banks scarred by time and wind. A rickety wooden bridge spanned the gap, its planks warped and creaking under the weight of memory. Elias reined Jericho to a halt, scanning the horizon. The hounds were silent now, but dust clouds swirled in the distance, mercenaries, relentless as vultures circling a dying beast. Nietzsche, slumped against his back, stirred, her wound sapping her strength, but not her will. "We cross here," she whispered, pointing to the bridge. "It's the only way to the next canyon." Elias dismounted, helping Nietzsche down. Her deerskin dress was stiff with dried blood, but her grip on the map pouch was unyielding. The bridge groaned under their weight as they led Jericho across, each step a gamble against rotting wood. Halfway over, a shadow moved on the far bank. A man, broad-shouldered, his skin dark as the night they'd left behind. He stepped into view, a blacksmith's hammer in one hand, a knife glinting in the other. "Hold it," he growled, voice deep as a canyon echo. "Who are you running from?" Elias's hand hovered near his revolver, sizing up the stranger. His clothes were patched but clean, his eyes sharp with suspicion, not greed. "Name's Elias Kane," he said, voice steady. "This is Nietzsche. We're dodging trouble that ain't yours." The man's gaze flicked to Nietzsche, noting her Apache garb and the blood on her dress. "Trouble's got a way of finding everyone out here," he said, lowering the knife but not the hammer. "I'm Jonas Hale, and I don't trust a white man with a rifle or an Apache with secrets." Before Elias could respond, a rifle crack split the air. A bullet splintered the bridge's railing, inches from Nietzsche's head. Elias yanked her down, shoving her behind a support beam as Jericho reared. On the near bank, 4 mercenaries emerged from the dust, their rifles gleaming with morning light. "Give us the woman and the map," one shouted, his voice raw with greed. Elias fired back, his shot kicking sand at their feet, buying time. Jonas, caught in the open, dove behind a boulder, his hammer useless at range. Nietzsche, crouched low, drew a short blade from her boot, her eyes fierce despite her pallor. "We fight together," she hissed, cutting a glance at Jonas. Elias nodded, reloading. "Jonas, you with us or not?" The blacksmith hesitated, then cursed under his breath, tossing his knife to the ground. "Damn fools," he muttered, swinging his hammer as he charged the nearest mercenary who'd crossed the bridge. The blow landed with a sickening crunch, dropping the man like a felled tree. Elias and Nietzsche joined the fray, a desperate dance of survival. Elias's revolver barked, taking down a second mercenary, while Nietzsche's blade found the thigh of another, her movement swift despite her wound. Jonas, a whirlwind of muscle and rage, smashed the hammer into the fourth man's rifle, shattering it. The fight ended as quickly as it began, the mercenaries' bodies strewn across the bridge, blood seeping into the cracked wood. Jonas panted, his eyes meeting Elias's. "I lost my land to men like them," he said, voice raw. "Promised me freedom after the war, then took it for their railroads. You two running from the same kind?" Nietzsche, clutching her side, nodded. "They want our water, our land, for silver." Jonas's jaw tightened. He'd heard whispers of the mining company's greed, stripping men like him and tribes like hers. "I'm in," he said, picking up a fallen mercenary's rifle. "But don't expect me to trust you yet." Elias offered a grim nod. "Fair enough. Let's move before more come." They crossed the bridge, the riverbed's shadows swallowing their tracks. Jonas's presence felt like a storm cloud, unpredictable, heavy with potential. Elias glanced at Nietzsche, her face etched with pain but unyielding. The map in her pouch was their guide, but Jonas's hammer might be the weight that tipped their odds. The canyon ahead promised cover, but also danger, a path where trust would be forged or broken. The canyon ahead promised cover, but its shadows held menace as sharp as a rattler's fang. Dawn's light bled across the Arizona desert of 1887, painting the rocks red as the blood spilled on the bridge behind them. Elias Kane led the way, Jericho's hooves crunching on gravel, Nietzsche's breath ragged but steady beside him, her map pouch tucked tight against her wounded side. Jonas Hale, the blacksmith with a hammer and a grudge, brought up the rear, his stolen rifle slung across his back. Their alliance was brittle, forged in a fight, but untested by time. Each step a gamble on trust they barely had. They needed shelter, a place to lose the mercenaries' hound still sniffing their trail. Nietzsche, her face drawn with pain, pointed to a jagged scar in the canyon wall, a forgotten mine, its mouth yawning like a grave. "Old silver shaft," she said, voice low. "Abandoned when the vein dried up. It'll hide us." Elias nodded. though the thought of those dark tunnels tightened his chest. He'd seen men trapped in mines, crushed by greed or bad luck. But with the sun rising and their pursuers closing, they had no choice. The mine's entrance swallowed them, the air turning damp and heavy, smelling of earth and rust. Elias lit a small lantern, its flicker casting ghosts on the walls, timbers sagging under the weight of years. Jonas tested a support beam with his hammer, the dull thud echoing like a warning. This place could collapse, he muttered, eyes scanning the darkness. Better than a bullet, Elias shot back, guiding Nietzsche deeper. Her steps faltered, her wound slowing her, but her gaze remained sharp, reading the mine's twists like a map of her own. They found a chamber where the tunnel widened, littered with broken pickaxes and rusted rails. Elias eased Nietzsche onto a flat rock, checking her bandage. The bleeding had slowed, but infection loomed like a storm cloud. "We rest here," he said, "but not long." Jonas crouched, inspecting the floor for tracks. "No one's been here in years," he said, voice gruff. "Good. Means no ambushes." But his eyes lingered on Elias, suspicion still smoldering. Nietzsche broke the silence. "We don't have years. They'll find this place by noon." The lantern's glow revealed their faces, each marked by their own wars. Elias's fingers traced the scar on his jaw, a memento from a cavalry blade when he'd refused to fire on Apache women. "I rode with men who burned villages for silver," he said, the words spilling like poison. "One night, I aimed at a camp. Kids, elders, all of them. Pulled the trigger. Still hear their screams." His voice cracked, the mine's walls drinking in his confession. Nietzsche's eyes softened, not with pity but understanding. "My father led our warriors," she said. "Army rounded us up like cattle, marched us till our feet bled. He died so I could keep that map." Jonas's hammer stilled, his broad shoulders hunching. "After the war, they promised me land," he said, voice raw as the desert wind. 40 acres. Freedom. Railroad men took it, left me with nothing but this hammer." He gripped it, knuckles whitening. "Same bastards chasing you want my people's bones for their profit." The shared weight of betrayal hung heavy, binding them tighter than any oath. Nietzsche reached out, her hand steady despite her pain. "We carry our dead with us," she said, "but we fight for the living." A distant clatter broke the moment, rocks falling near the mine's entrance. Elias doused the lantern, plunging them into blackness. His hand found his revolver, ears straining. Footsteps, cautious but heavy, echoed closer. "Mercenaries," Jonas whispered, hefting his rifle. Elias motioned for silence, guiding Nietzsche behind a rusted ore cart. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a low whistle. A signal. "They know we're here," Elias hissed. "Back tunnel now." They moved blindly, Nietzsche's hand on Elias's shoulder, Jonas guarding their rear. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to crawl through a choke of fallen stone. A gunshot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off the wall, showering them with dust. Elias fired back, the flash of his revolver revealing 2 shadowed figures. Jonas lunged, his hammer smashing a rifle from one's hands. Nietzsche, with a strength born of desperation, drove her blade into the second man's leg. The mercenaries retreated, cursing, their lanterns flickering as they fled. They emerged into a side shaft, moonlight spilling through a collapsed ceiling. Elias checked Nietzsche's wound, bleeding again, but she waved him off. "The well's closer," she said, clutching the map. "We keep moving." Jonas nodded, his suspicion fading into grim resolve. The mine had tested them, and they'd survived. But the desert outside waited, merciless as ever, with more hunters on their trail. Moonlight spilled through the mine's broken ceiling, silvering the Arizona desert of 1887 as Elias Kane, Nietzsche, and Jonas Hale emerged from the dark. The air was sharp with the scent of dust and freedom, but danger clung like a burr. Nietzsche clutched her map, her wound bleeding anew, her face a mask of grit despite the pain. Jonas, his hammer slung at his belt, scanned the horizon, the stolen rifle a new weight on his shoulder. Elias led Jericho, the horse's breath steaming in the dawn chill. The mine had forged their trust, but the desert offered no mercy, and the mercenaries' lanterns still flickered in the distance. They trekked toward a border town, a speck of life called Dusty Hollow, nestled in a valley where the canyon spilled into scrubland. Elias knew it from his cavalry days, a lawless pit of saloons and broken dreams, where men sold their souls for whiskey or silver. "We need horses, supplies," he said, voice low. "But keep your eyes sharp. This place eats the careless." Nietzsche nodded, her hand on the pouch, while Jonas's jaw tightened, his distrust of towns as deep as his scars from betrayal. Dusty Hollow sprawled under a haze of dust and smoke, its wooden shacks leaning like drunks after a brawl. The main street buzzed with morning trade, traders hawking pelts, miners staggering from saloons, their eyes glinting with greed. Elias tethered Jericho behind a livery stable, out of sight. Nietzsche, her deerskin dress hidden under Elias's spare coat, moved stiffly, her wound slowing her steps. Jonas, towering and watchful, drew stairs, his hammer marking him as no ordinary traveler. "Split up," Elias said. "I'll get horses. Jonas, find food. Nietzsche, stay low." The livery smelled of hay and sweat, the stableman a wiry man with a tobacco-stained grin. "2 horses, sturdy ones," Elias said, sliding coins across the counter. The man's eyes narrowed, lingering on Elias's scar. "Seen you before, mister. Cavalry, years back?" Elias's hand twitched toward his revolver. "You're mistaken," he said, voice cold. The man shrugged, but his gaze darted to a shadow in the corner, a lean figure in a black hat, watching. Elias's gut twisted. Trouble had found them. Across town, Jonas bartered for dried beef and hardtack in a general store, his deep voice cutting through the clerk's chatter. A drunk miner bumped him, spitting a slur. Jonas's fist clenched, but he held back, knowing a fight would draw eyes. Outside, he caught a glimpse of a man in a tailored coat, too clean for this dust-choked town, whispering to a group of roughnecks. Jonas's blood ran cold. He'd seen that coat before, in papers detailing land grabs. Judge Croft's man. Nietzsche, hiding in an alley, overheard 2 saloon girls muttering about a bounty on an Apache woman with a map. Her hand tightened on her blade, but her vision blurred, the infection gnawing at her strength. She slipped into a shadowed doorway, heart pounding as boots clomped nearby. A voice, oily and familiar, called out, "Find her, boys. Croft pays double for that map." Nietzsche's breath hitched. They were closing in. Elias met Jonas and Nietzsche behind the saloon, his face grim. "Got the horses, but we're made. Croft's men are here." Jonas nodded, handing over the supplies. "Saw one of his lackeys. They're sniffing for us." Nietzsche, pale but fierce, drew her blade. "We fight out," she said, voice steady despite her trembling hands. Before they could move, a shout rang out. "There they are!" 6 mercenaries stormed the alley, rifles raised, led by the man in the black hat, Croft's enforcer, Silas Vane. The fight erupted like a desert storm. Elias's revolver roared, dropping one man as he dove behind a barrel. Jonas swung his hammer, shattering a rifle and a wrist in one blow, his roar drowning the chaos. Nietzsche, with a warrior's grace, loosed an arrow from a scavenged bow, piercing Vane's shoulder. He cursed, retreating as his men faltered. Elias grabbed Nietzsche, pulling her toward the horses. "Go!" he shouted. Jonas cleared a path, his hammer a blur, as they broke for the livery. They mounted and tore through Dusty Hollow, bullets kicking up dust at their heels. The town faded into the haze, but Vane's voice echoed, "You can't run forever." Elias glanced at Nietzsche, her face set like stone. The map, their only hope. The desert stretched wide, a gauntlet of sand and betrayal, but the well was closer, and so was their reckoning. The desert stretched wide, a gauntlet of sand and betrayal, its vastness swallowing the hoofbeats of Elias Kane, Nietzsche, and Jonas Hale as they fled Dusty Hollow. The Arizona sun of 1887 scorched the earth, baking the air into a shimmering haze. Nietzsche clung to the map, her face carved with pain but unyielding, the sacred well closer with every mile. Elias urged their stolen horses forward, his eyes scanning for the dust trails of Silas Vane's mercenaries. Jonas, hammer at his hip, rode with a scowl, the weight of their narrow escape fueling his resolve. The horizon promised refuge, but the desert kept its own counsel, hiding traps in its folds. By dusk, they reached a silver mine, its entrance a black maw in a rocky hillside, framed by sagging timbers and littered with abandoned tools. "Active operation," Elias muttered, noting fresh cart tracks. "Croft's men run this place." Nietzsche's eyes narrowed. "We skirt it," she said, voice tight. "Too dangerous." But as they turned, a rifle shot cracked, kicking up sand at their feet. Shadows moved on the ridge above. 8 mercenaries, rifles glinting, led by a limping Silas Vane, his shoulder bandaged from Nietzsche's arrow. "No running now," he bellowed, signaling his men to close in. Elias spurred his horse toward the mine's mouth, the only cover in sight. Jonas and Nietzsche followed, dismounting as bullets whined past. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the tang of metal, tunnels branching into darkness. Elias tethered the horses behind a pile of ore, his revolver drawn. "We're trapped," Jonas growled, gripping his hammer. Nietzsche, pale from her wound, shook her head. "There's always a way." Her fingers traced the map, eyes scanning for an exit route marked by her people. "Side shaft, west side, leads out." The mercenaries' boots echoed at the entrance, lanterns casting jagged shadows. Elias motioned for silence, leading them deeper into the mine. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to crouch, the walls slick with damp. Nietzsche's breathing was labored, her wound seeping again, but she moved with a warrior's focus. Jonas brought up the rear, his stolen rifle ready. A sudden shout, "They're in here!" sent Elias spinning, firing a shot that sparked off a timber, slowing their pursuers. "Keep moving," he hissed, heart pounding like a war drum. They reached a cavern where the tunnel opened, lit by a single shaft of fading sunlight from a high vent. Crates of dynamite lined the walls, a death trap waiting to ignite. Before Elias could warn them, Vane's voice rang out. "End of the line, Kane." The enforcer stepped into the cavern, flanked by 4 men, rifles leveled. Behind him, Judge Croft himself emerged, his silver-tipped cane tapping the stone floor, eyes cold as a snake's. "The map," Croft said, voice smooth as poison. "Hand it over, and the woman might live." Jonas's eyes flicked to Elias, a plan forming. "I'll give you the Apache," he said, stepping forward, hammer lowered. Elias tensed, but Nietzsche's slight nod told him to play along. Jonas approached Vane, voice low. "She's worth more than you're paying." Croft's lip curled. "Name your price." Jonas lunged, hurling a lantern at a dynamite crate. The glass shattered, oil igniting in a whoosh of flame. "Run!" he roared, as the cavern erupted in chaos. Elias grabbed Nietzsche, diving for the side shaft as bullets tore through the air. Jonas swung his hammer, crushing a mercenary's skull, then followed, the flames licking at their heels. The tunnel shook, rocks falling as the dynamite threatened to blow. Nietzsche, fueled by desperation, led them through the twisting shaft, her map's symbols guiding her. They burst out into a dry wash, the mine's roar fading behind them. Croft's scream echoed, "You'll pay!" But the collapsing tunnel swallowed his men. Jonas clutched a leather-bound ledger, snatched from Vane in the melee. "Payments!" he panted, flipping it open. Croft to a senator. Names. Dates. Nietzsche, leaning against a rock, clutched her side, blood staining her coat. "The well's a day away," she said, voice faint but fierce. Elias checked her wound, his face grim. "You need a doctor." She shook her head. "I need that well." The ledger and map were their weapons now, but the desert held more hunters, and Croft's master in Washington was watching. The ledger and map were their weapons now, sharp as any blade, but the Arizona desert of 1887 held hunters deadlier than steel. Elias Kane, Nietzsche, and Jonas Hale rode hard through the dry wash, the collapsing mine's rumble fading behind them. Nietzsche's face was pale as bone, her wound bleeding through her coat, yet her grip on the map never wavered. Elias scanned the horizon, the setting sun painting the dunes blood red, while Jonas clutched the stolen ledger, its pages heavy with proof of corruption. The sacred well was a day away, but every mile felt like a gauntlet, with Croft's men and their Washington puppet closing in. By dawn, the desert gave way to a maze of canyons, their walls carved by ancient floods into jagged spires. Nietzsche, swaying in the saddle, pointed to a hidden cleft. "There," she rasped, voice faint but certain. "The well's beyond." Elias steadied her, his own exhaustion buried under the need to keep her alive. Jonas, his hammer swinging at his hip, scouted ahead, his eyes sharp for ambushes. The air grew heavy, thick with the promise of water and danger. As they entered the cleft, the canyon narrowed, its shadows cool and foreboding, like a tomb waiting to claim them. The trail opened into a hidden valley, where the sacred well shimmered, an oasis cradled by cliffs, its surface catching the morning light like a mirror to the sky. Nietzsche dismounted, stumbling but driven, and knelt by the water. "This is it," she whispered, dipping her hands into the cool depths. Her tribe, gaunt and desperate, emerged from the rocks, elders, children, warriors, their faces hollow from drought. They drank, their eyes brightening with hope, the well's water a lifeline to a people on the edge of death. Elias watched, his chest tight, the sight stirring memories of Apache families he'd failed to save. Jonas handed Nietzsche a gourd filled with water, his gruff voice soft. "This is what they wanted to steal." She nodded, pouring water over her wound, the act both practical and sacred. But the moment shattered as hoofbeats thundered from the canyon's mouth. Elias spun, revolver drawn, spotting a dozen cavalry riders, army, not mercenaries, their blue coats stark against the red rock. "They found us," he growled, pushing Nietzsche behind a boulder. Jonas hefted his rifle, his face set like iron. "Croft's orders, I'd bet." The lead rider, a captain with a scar across his cheek, raised a hand. "Elias Kane, surrender the woman and the map." Elias's blood ran cold. Desertion was a hanging offense, and aiding an Apache was worse. "Not happening," he shouted, firing a warning shot that kicked up dust. The captain signaled, and his men fanned out, rifles ready. Nietzsche, clutching the map, whispered, "The tribe must live." Elias met her eyes, seeing her readiness to die. "You're not dying today," he said, voice firm. He turned to Jonas. "Get them out. Back trail through the cliffs." Jonas hesitated, then nodded, leading the tribe toward a narrow path. Elias prepared to hold the line, his revolver steady, ready to buy time with his life. But Nietzsche grabbed his arm, her grip fierce despite her weakness. "We fight together," she said, drawing her blade. Before he could argue, Apache warriors emerged from the shadows, their bows silent but deadly, arrows felling 2 riders before the soldiers could react. The fight was swift and brutal. Elias's revolver roared, dropping a soldier as he charged. Naiche's blade flashed, slashing a horse's reins, sending its rider sprawling. Jonas, returning with a warrior's speed, swung his hammer, breaking a rifleman's arm. The captain rallied his men, but the Apache's arrows and the trio's ferocity turned the tide. The soldiers retreated, leaving 4 dead, their blood soaking the sand. The captain's parting shout echoed, "This ain't over, Kane!" Naiche, panting, handed Elias the map. "The tribe's safe for now," she said, her voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. Jonas held up the ledger. "This gets us to Washington. Names, payments, proof." Elias nodded, his eyes on Naiche's bloodied coat. "First, we get you patched up." She shook her head, pointing to the well. "This water heals. I'll make it." The valley stood silent, the well's shimmer a testament to their victory, but the shadow of a senator loomed, and the desert still hungered for their lives. The sacred well's shimmer held the Arizona dawn of 1887 like a promise kept, its waters sustaining Naiche's tribe against the desert's cruel grip. Elias Kane stood guard on a cliff overlooking the valley, his revolver heavy in his hand, the weight of their victory tempered by the shadow of a senator's reach. Naiche, her wound cleansed by the well's water, rested below, her strength returning like a slow sunrise. Jonas Hale, ledger tucked inside his coat, scouted the canyon's edge, his hammer a silent vow of defiance. The soldiers' retreat had bought them time, but Washington's corruption loomed, and the desert still whispered of pursuit. As the first rays of sun burned the horizon red, Elias felt the weight of their next move. The map and ledger were their weapons, but delivering them to Washington meant crossing a continent crawling with enemies. Naiche climbed the cliff to join him, her steps steadier, her eyes sharp despite the fever's lingering shadow. "The tribe will guard the well," she said, voice firm as the rock beneath her. "But we must go east. The truth can't stay buried here." Jonas, returning from his scout, nodded. "This ledger names a senator, Harrington. He's the puppet master. We expose him. We stop this." Elias scanned the desert, its dunes stretching like an endless sea. "Harrington's got men everywhere, railroads, telegraphs, Pinkertons. We'll be hunted every step." Jonas's jaw tightened. "Let 'em come. I've lost too much to back down now." Naiche's hand brushed the map pouch, her resolve a flame that outshone her pain. "My people's lives depend on this. We ride today." Elias met her gaze, seeing not just a warrior, but a woman who'd become his anchor in this storm of betrayal. They descended to the valley, where the tribe prepared to disperse, their faces alight with renewed hope. An elder gifted them fresh horses, sleek mustangs bred for the desert's trials. Naiche spoke briefly in Apache, her words a prayer for the well's protection, then mounted with a wince, her wound still raw. Elias packed their meager supplies, hardtack, water, ammunition, while Jonas checked the ledger, its pages a map of greed linking Croft to Harrington. As they rode out, the tribe's chants followed, a low hum that felt like the desert's heartbeat. The trail east was a brutal gauntlet, winding through sun-scorched flats and treacherous ravines. By noon, dust clouds rose behind them. Riders, too disciplined for mercenaries, likely Pinkertons sent by Harrington. Elias pushed the horses harder, the Mustang's hooves kicking up sand like a storm. Naiche, riding beside him, pointed to a narrow pass. "There," she said. "It'll slow them." The pass was a choke point, its walls steep and unforgiving, perfect for an ambush or escape. They entered the pass, the air thick with heat and tension. Jonas dismounted, climbing a ledge to watch their rear. 6 riders, he called down, voice grim. Moving fast. Elias handed Nietzsche his spare revolver. You good to shoot? She nodded, her grip steady despite her pallor. The Pinkertons appeared, their coats marked with the agency's badge, rifles gleaming. Kane, their leader shouted, give up the documents, and you walk away. Elias's laugh was bitter. You know I won't. The fight erupted like a spark in dry grass. Elias fired, his bullet grazing the leader's arm, forcing him to cover. Nietzsche's revolver cracked, dropping a rider with deadly precision. Jonas, from above, hurled a rock, smashing another's shoulder, then fired his rifle, scattering the rest. The Pinkertons retreated, but not before a bullet clipped Elias's thigh, blood soaking his jeans. Nietzsche tore a strip from her dress, binding his wound with practiced hands. You're not dying on me, she said, her voice a mix of command and care. They pressed on, the pass opening to a wide plain. Elias's wound throbbed, but Nietzsche's touch lingered in his mind, a tether to something beyond survival. Jonas, scouting ahead, found a telegraph station abandoned in the desert's heat. We can send a wire, he said, flipping through the ledger. Names, dates, enough to stir Washington before we arrive. Nietzsche nodded. It's a start. They sent the message, a warning of Harrington's treachery, knowing it might not reach the right hands but daring to hope. As night fell, they camped under a sky blazing with stars, the desert quiet but watchful. Elias looked at Nietzsche, her face softened by firelight, and Jonas, his hammer resting like a sentinel. They'd crossed a frontier not just of sand, but of trust, forged by shared scars. Washington lay ahead, a battle of words and power. But here, in this moment, they'd found something worth fighting for. A new dawn, burning bright. The desert's dawn fades, but Elias, Nietzsche, and Jonas's fight for justice burns on, their bond a beacon against greed's shadow. We hope their tale of grit and redemption stirred your heart as it did ours. Please share your thoughts. What moved you most about their journey? Your reflections keep these stories alive. We're grateful for you joining us in this wild ride through the Arizona sands of 1887. Until we meet again, under another frontier sky, keep chasing truths that matter. Stay tuned for more tales where courage meets the untamed West.